Hello. This is day 4 in our devotions about Jesus' relationship with the law. And we started out with a couple instances where Jesus seems to say that following the letter of the law is not what I'm asking for, and actually breaks the laws that the Jewish people had from God, and moves in a new direction. We talked about yesterday um, how the Pharisees, they're good at pointing out where people are falling short, but they do nothing to help. And that is not God's desire, that if we're going to point out what's wrong, we need to be ready to help people overcome that, because that's what God does for us. Um, Today we're going to switch a little bit and talk about some of the other side where Jesus not only upholds the law of Moses and the law of the Old Testament, but actually doubles down and makes it more strict. And this comes from the Sermon on the Mount, the 5th chapter of Matthew. And I'm going to read excerpts of this. I'm going to start in 21 and I'll kind of jump around because but it all starts with this phrase that says, "You have heard it was said," and then it inserts something, "But I say to you." And Jesus kind of redefines or continues to talk, and so I'll start here in 21. "You have heard it said that those said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment.' But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire." Goes on in verse 27, "You have heard it said that you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart." In verse 31, it says, "It was also said, 'Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce.' But I say to you, anyone who divorces his wife, except for the grounds of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Verse 33, "Again, you have heard it said that to those in ancient times, 'You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord.' But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven or by the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King." Verse 38 says, "You have heard it was said, 'An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.' But I say, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also." 43, "You have heard it said, 'You shall love your neighbors and hate your enemies.' But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of the Father in heaven." All of these instances are laws and policies and and things that guided the Jewish people for generations. And Jesus comes and says, "Hey," some of them he says, "Hey, you've heard this, but I'm going to go one step further. You've heard, that murder is wrong, but if you hate someone else, you're also liable for that. Adultery is wrong, but if you lust after someone, you already have committed adultery in your heart. You should not swear falsely, but God says Jesus says, I don't think you should make oaths at all. An eye for an eye, a tooth for the tooth, but instead offer your other cheek to those who strike you. Love your enemies, or love your neighbors and hate your enemies, but I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you. These one step further laws. And you get the sense when you read these that the people that were living up to the letter of these laws weren't actually following the heart of God. I can do a lot to someone else and not murder them and still be within the realm of what is the letter of the law. But Jesus says, no, the heart of that is that I don't want you to hate someone else. It's easy to come up with the gray areas and say, I'm following the letter of the law if I never, commit adultery and have sex with someone else, outside of my marriage or if they're married. But Jesus says, no, the real heart is that that's not something you should even desire. And it's not about finding where the line is and, just not crossing it and kind of figuring out how far you can go without crossing the line. It's the essence of what's behind it. And so Jesus has these moments where he takes the law that they know and he says, if you're really going to follow this, if you're really going to live this out, it's not about the letter of the law, but it's about the heart of the law behind what is written. And this is a really hard thing to do. It's a really hard to do in our legal system today. Lots of people get off on technicalities because the language of the law, they can't quite prove that they did exactly what the law prohibits. But that doesn't mean that they're not wrong. That doesn't mean they haven't done something to hurt someone else or hurt society in some way. Our legal system is a lot of lawyers' jobs is to find those loopholes and find where the lines are and prove that someone, maybe they were right up against the line, but maybe they didn't pass it, and so they're still in that legal realm, even though what they did has caused harm and pain and hurt. God's desire is not for us to find the letter of the law, to define the line of what's in and what's out and move as close as we can without going over. God's heart is for us to live in a space that never moves towards the line at all, that never moves towards harming someone else or hurting someone else, and it never moves towards making enemies. It's not about what we can or can't do, but God and Jesus brings back, what should you be doing to honor this relationship that God and you have together, to honor the relationship that God created between you and your neighbors. What's the best thing? Sometimes the letter of the law doesn't help us to live out the best thing for those relationships. Sometimes there's more, and the heart of what the law is asking us is the true way that we honor God and love our neighbors. Amen.